Now, here on YouTube, the daily vlog market is saturated enough, which is why I am pioneering the annual vlog, where I talk about what went on during my academic year. And this year I will be discussing how my transition to university wasn't quite what I expected it to be, and all the many challenges it came with. Going into university, I knew it was going to be more difficult than high school, but that difficulty came in unexpected areas. I thought the course content itself would be the challenge, and that the workload compared to high school would be less, but it ended up being sort of the opposite. The course content is actually quite fine. A lot of it is either building off of stuff you learned in high school, or sometimes even reteaching you stuff you learned in high school, which is quite nice. The difficulty comes with the amount of work you're given to do outside of lecture. And that, along with constant midterms and tests, makes everything quite stressful and overwhelming. In high school, I wasn't given too much homework, and the homework that I was given was more often either for completion rather than correctness, or it was completely optional. Here at university, the homework is almost never for completion, and it is always for correctness, and it often takes the form of quizzes on websites like Canvas and whatnot, where you're only given a certain amount of attempts to answer all the questions correctly. This can be quite stressful and leads to spending a lot more time on homework than you would anticipate. This can be quite destructive, as that in pursuit of that 100 on your homework, which is only worth sometimes 5% of your grade, you end up wasting a lot of time, which could be better spent studying for your other midterms. The courses themselves are also quite dense, with a lot of material being covered in a short amount of time. This means that it's quite easy to get left behind if you don't keep up with your work. As a science student, my terms consisted of about a month of buffer time, in which it was just lectures and additional learning activities outside of class. And then after that month, it was midterm season. Now, midterm season would then last from the first month of class pretty much to the end, and it is categorized by having consecutive, almost weekly midterms for all your classes. And it's quite stressful having back-to-back midterms, sometimes multiple on the same week or day if you're unfortunate. This means that on top of struggling on your weekly assignments and whatnot, you also have to worry about studying for large midterms, which are often worth large chunks of your grade, over 15% per midterm. In high school, I found that as long as I did the recommended homework and I paid attention in class, I could do fairly well on most tests. But that is not exactly the case here. If you simply pay attention in lecture and do the homework and other assignments, that is sort of the bare minimum you can do to prepare for a midterm. In high school, most tests often had questions that you'd either seen before in class or were obviously mimicking them. That is not the case here, and the questions will often take on weird, complex forms that you've never seen before, going well above the material in lecture, which makes them quite difficult. Here are the top 5 emotions I experienced during my first year at university. Now, as far as advice is concerned, I guess the biggest thing I'd recommend for incoming university students is to prioritize organization. When you're given so many tests and quizzes and homework and other assignments all due, you need to make sure that you plan everything out of when you're going to do certain activities such as studying and homework and how you're going to balance it all together. So for me, I found it very helpful to have this little like planner where I could just like physically write out what I needed to do on a daily basis every day, so I wouldn't forget to do anything. I also had a weekly calendar with all my courses and their allocated time, so I wouldn't forget what classes I had to go to next. And then I even had underneath that another weekly calendar, but this time with all my different assignments that I knew were going to be given each week and sort of what days I wanted to complete them on. And then of course as backup I had sticky notes. So I think that just knowing when you're going to do all your different things is just super helpful to know instead of just figuring it out as you go each day, because then you're more prone to forget things. So in my Bio 112 class, the prof and some of the TAs were suggesting we all make cheat sheets. So I did that for that class, and I was like, wow, this is a really good idea. I'm going to start doing this for all of my classes. And then it eventually became... So what I did is I made a condensed version of all the important notes that I needed to remember for the test. And that eventually ended up becoming like cheat pamphlets, because I just had more information than could fit on one page neatly. So I would make these little pamphlets for myself when I came to exams. So that way as a form of studying, because I find writing things down, just condensing big ideas into small summaries, I find that really helpful. Also just having nice notes to quickly flip through. I didn't use them much during actual exams, even though they were open book, but just having them next to me in case I needed them was just kind of a little reassuring, and I think helps alleviate some stress. Normally for these videos, I like to take my old notes and my old schoolwork and sort of throw it up in the air or all over the ground and do all sorts of crazy shenanigans with it. But unfortunately this year, I ended up taking most of my notes on binders like these, and I can't really do those same things with that. And then I even started taking electronic notes towards the end of term 2, so sorry about that. Okay, so here's the part where I talk about what classes I took, starting with Term 1, Chem 120. This was all the chemistry about bonding and molecular interactions and why sometimes the things like to stick together and sometimes why they don't. Overall, the course content was pretty fine. A lot of it was pretty conceptual. And my one biggest issue with the course is that it constantly was teaching us different atomic bonding models, and then the next unit would be like, oh, and what you just learned was sort of dumb and not very good, and here's why it's not very good. And here's this other better way that we can represent bonding, but except it's a lot harder to do, and it's we don't use it as much because it's only useful in certain situations. And it just kept on doing that every unit, and it got a little frustrating after a while. It's like, there's too many different ways to represent bonding. Bio 112. This is probably my favorite course I took this year. It was all about cellular biology and various mechanisms that go on inside the cell. It had a lot of concepts that came back from Bio 12, especially regarding introductory biochemical stuff, and I find that stuff pretty interesting. So I actually quite enjoyed this class. Math 180. This was my first time ever taking a calculus course, and surprisingly the math isn't as hard as it seems. Except the way that my professor liked to teach it was super conceptual. So my professor was super into the conceptual aspects of differential calculus. And our lectures were actually really good. But our exams were just kind of little math essays where we had to use a lot of more writing than actual math to explain different arguments. And a lot of it was just going over my head because I had never done conceptual math before. English 110. So this is sort of just like your standard English class. You gotta read a bunch of stuff, and then you gotta write about the stuff. And our whole theme was all around shipwrecks. So I thought that was kind of fun. Physics 100. So this is my first time taking a physics class in a while. So in grade 11, I took physics online, and I absolutely hated it, and then I never took Physics 12, so I had to take this class first semester to make up for not taking Physics 12 in high school, and I surprisingly enjoyed it. A lot of the beginning stuff was stuff that I was already familiar with, like kinematics and whatnot, right from Physics 11, so I found that pretty chill. And then the whole course is just structured around sort of just making your way down the formula sheet, and as you go along, understanding all the different concepts behind the formulas and also how to rearrange them. And pretty much if you have a good conceptual understanding of the formulas and what they represent and also how to use those formulas mathematically, you can pretty much do any question in the course. So I thought that was pretty fun. Also, the grading scheme was pretty good. Term 2, Chem 130. This chemistry class was structured into 2 portions. So first we had the physical chemistry, doing with stuff like free energy and whatnot. And then we had the second portion of it, which was all around organic chemistry. Overall, I enjoyed this chem course a lot more than my first one, even though it was more difficult. I think that's because the content was all structured around like different reactions, like reaction rates, organic chemistry. It felt a lot more like chemistry. That sounds weird. Then my previous course was just all around why different things like to bond, which I don't know, I thought that was kind of lame in comparison to this one. And also, we had to get like these organic modeling kits, or we were recommended to get them, and they're kind of fun to play with. Woo! Woo! And now, fun things to do with your organic chemistry modeling kit. Math 105. So this was integral calculus, and this was kind of quite different than my differential calculus class. So in term 1, my professor was super into all about like the big conceptual understanding of differential calculus and derivatives and whatnot. But this term, the professor was super into just like the straight computation of it. So I found that aspect pretty difficult. So our exams are done through this website called WebWork, which is real stinky website, and our answers had to be exactly the right answer, and there were no part marks, and that's kind of how I survived math in high school, was through part marks. So not having them here really messed me up. So where my first math class was super conceptual, my second one was really computational, and I just wish I could have had a class that could have just combined those two aspects just a little better. Maybe I would have done a little better as well. You never know. Or another option would be to having written questions, so just a standard computational question, except you have to write down what your answer is and show all your work, and that way you can get bonus marks just for showing your work. My integral calculus class also had a bit of multivariable calculus tacked on at the beginning for whatever reason, and I thought that was actually kind of fun. But overall, calculus stinks, and Isaac Newton can eat my jorts. Bio 140. This was a bio lab class, but done virtually through Zoom. So instead of labs, it was mostly just a discussion-based lecture. We were talking about different things, and a huge part of the class was actually on group work and project work. So I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, it's nice meeting new people, but I think I always like to work individually as opposed to in groups for projects. It also meant that, we got a good understanding of, like broad research ideas and how research is done and how papers are written and whatnot. A lot of the details felt like they were missing, and instead of exploring like a bio laboratory and seeing all the different equipment and how it's done, we were instead given like crappy YouTube videos to watch, so I don't know. Physics 131. So this was what I like to call wiggly physics. So it was all things about that kind of wiggle and wobble and wobbly wobbly. So things like light, fluids, simple harmonic motion, all those sorts of wibbly wobbly things. So that was kind of fun. The course was also very similarly structured to my previous physics class, in that the entire time you sort of just, you're given this formula sheet for your tests and whatnot, and the entire class you're just kind of going down the formula sheet, understanding the concepts and then also the math. So once again, same thing. If you're able to understand the concepts behind the formulas and how to use them mathematically, you can pretty much answer any question in the class. So I enjoyed it from that aspect. Also, our lecture TA was really great. Not all my classes had lecture TAs. Some classes I never even got to see the TAs. Chemistry. And it was pretty fun because he would come into class early. We could hang out with him and chat. He was super responsive in the chat, and he would play music for us during clicker questions. It was all around a good time. Bio 121. This was genetics and ecology, and it actually ended up being incredibly similar to biology 11. So that made it a pretty chill class content-wise. Nothing too difficult there, which was really nice. And also, we had two professors because just like bio 11, my first one ended up going on mat leave. And they were both absolutely amazing. So I had a blast in that class. Great lectures, great teaching team, all around good times. Chem 115. So this is the lab portion of the chemistry class I took in term 1, except it was only offered in term 2 because they were still figuring out how to do it. And it was a little weird because basically we were having to watch labs being broadcast through Zoom, and then we had to write down our observations as if we were performing them live, which was a little weird. And because the TAs would only show the video once, sometimes their internet would just be crappy, and you couldn't really see exactly what was going on in perfect detail. I found that I could just look up what the experiments were before the lab and watch them on YouTube, so I could have a really good idea of what my observations were going to be going into the lab. So that's some free advice for you. Now a bit of a mini rant. So my school, unlike most schools, does not offer direct entry into your major of choice when it comes to sciences. So whereas normally you would, for me, I want to go into biology. So I would apply to a school to their biology program, and then I would get into their biology program, and I would be doing biology in first year. But at my school, I'm in just sciences along with everyone else in sciences. So it means you're taking a whole lot of breadth courses, which are not necessarily relevant to your degree. And my problem with that is that you're having to pay for things that you don't need. And there's also a whole bunch of competition that happens as a result, because you are not guaranteed a spot into your major of choice. So while encouraging people to learn about things outside their area of expertise and to explore new subjects is a good idea, I think that making people pay the ridiculous amount of money that university courses cost, alongside forcing them to learn about things that they do not need to know, I think that's just a little ridiculous. So overall, this year was definitely a bit of a disaster for my mental health, and the transition to university was not exactly what I expected. But there were some things that I enjoyed along the way. I definitely had some interesting classes, and even the ones that I didn't do particularly well in, I still thought the content was somewhat interesting, I guess. But moving forward, I'm looking forward to pursuing my degree in biology. And that means I never have to take another physics or math class again in my life. It's especially the math part that I'm excited about. I would like to thank all my friends and family members for helping me survive through this year. It's been a bit of a struggle, and hopefully things get better in future years. I know my university is planning on doing more in-person activities next year, and I'm actually going to be moving onto campus this coming weekend, which will be definitely an exciting experience. And I would like to give a special shout out to the songs Black Box Warrior OK Ultra by Will Wood, and See the Day by Brian David Gilbert for helping me get through this year, especially on stressful days. And yeah, thank you for watching this video, and maybe another one next year on the annual vlog schedule. That's right, annual vlogs, once a year. It's the new thing, baby. We're all about innovation here at CryptoFlop Incorporated. Yes, all right. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Well, he collapsed Stevens-Johnson syndrome on the ER floor, panicked, attacked, anaphylactic, and ataxic, and the way he spun his butterfly risked all successful angiosperm candles up with thens in his synapses, and the method which he recycled his humorous Trojan horse, his blood-brain barrier, and raised the LD50, yes, and through flight or fight revelations, shame the Black Box Warrior, he escaped this town and headed straight down history. Shields himself from reason in a Kevlar baby blue tuxedo quilted from the finest fibers, flesh and fiberglass and flowers, his ego a mosquito, evil incarnate, good incognito, pops, placebos for libido, screaming plus the torpedoes, for what it's worth. If it was gonna kill you, boy, it would have by now. For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, it's looking up or looking down. Well, he was wearing stolen rubber shoes and rat poison ivy noose around his lotus jugular when they came. Well, they found him with the map to every victim of his love and a tattoo of a blue jay on his face. And they waited for his vital signs to line, let a flat line cry him out in Hungarian harmonic. But he cocked his noggin through his stoma, sang for Old Lang Syne, happy birthday to the succulents, all dire hydroponics. His ribcage was a hornet's nest, palpitations set to beat, his vagus nerves a Turk's had not an axle hitch a Kirk bend. He wondered if Christ consciousness would charge a cancellation fee, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir. He gripped his lips right by their ends. For what it's worth. If it was gonna kill you, boy, it would have by now. For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, it's looking up or looking down. Na 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 na
Hello, welcome. Why don't you take a seat? Get comfortable, relax. Take a second if you need to. Now, what's bothering you? Well, why don't we start at the beginning? Growing up, how was your relationship with the fundamentals of conscious existence? Did you have xenon orchid sinews spilling down the outer center over your blooming Escher Renderblatt head? How about claustrophilic tendrils clapping caskets closed on 7 knuckle thumbs? Did you align well with your giddy and bluegrass pineal glands? Your projector eyes cutting sci-fis on your STR strands? Tell me about your nerves of steel from under Bacchus' bloody nose. Did Nemui and Himbus tie-dye you, your ears pierced with a Phineas Gage flagpole? Did you die before your day? Thursday traction, Tuesday titration. My hope is to assess through my objective reporting for subjective conjecture whether this proprietary blend of expertise and seasoning works as well as a standardable ice pick. Holistic ballistics. You got a better idea? It's about the best we come up with. What? You think that idea is spread because they're good? No, they spread because we like them. So here we are, once again, holding, as it were, a mirror up to your mirror. I guess there's something people do.
A bloody knife to split your infrastructure, wine to rev your motor functions, coital machinations of the dead. Will you malign your animus, karate chop your abacus, and learn to be an animal instead? But I never did think you're better than this, your modus operandi, 'cause Nazis, schism, and suicide. Why to thine own self be true, when it is you who are the problem, not the things you do, but something sick inside?
Lithium and dielectrics, boy, really is defective. CBT don't seem effective for that cluster B, except to offer up your innocence. Please ignore the side effects. You've lost your mind and almost lost your life before, so you'll be fine. For what? For what? For what? For what? For what it's worth. If it was gonna kill you, boy, it would have by now. For what? For what? For what? For what? For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, and why would you want to look back? I mean, it's no good looking back, so try to look forward now. For what? For what? For what? For what? For what it's worth. If they were gonna get you, boy, they would have by now. For what? For what? For what? For what? For what it's worth. There's no more looking back, 'cause looking up or looking down.